Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Murder in the Black. I'm Steph. And if you've been here for a while, you already know. We try not to just tell stories, we unpack them. I try to leave you with some type of reflection that should linger with you long after the episode ends. But if you're new, especially if you came around season 8, you've probably heard our new segment. It's called True Crime and Current News, which means I spend a lot of time immersed in cases that are unfolding in real time. And when I say a lot, child, I mean a lot. But this is one of the cases that could have been featured, at least at a time, in that segment. Because when I first saw it, it was unsolved. And I put my head to the ground and started doing other cases. And I discovered that after a year or so, there was an update. It had been solved. And the reason it was solved? A mother who refused to accept the answers she was given. This is a story of April Lynn Holt. April was born July 6, 1994, in Florida. Later, her mother, Jamie, and her father, Jeremiah, would move to Tennessee in the Nashville area. And everything about April pointed to growth. She was driven, intentional. She had a light about her people described as infectious. She loved her family and her friends. And she built something for herself. After she graduated from high school, she started her own lash business, a studio. She wanted to feel peaceful, beautiful, a space where her clients felt good. And I've talked about this before on Murder in the Black. I feel like I can talk about it because I'm also in the beauty industry in addition to all the slashes that I do. I'm a braider in the Dallas Metroplex, but what I have come to understand about barbers, lash techs, estheticians, anybody who is in the beauty industry who has close contact with clients, well, they tend to look at you as a counselor, someone they can come and tell all their problems to, whether you're a stranger or not. And being a lash tech is something that you devote many hours to, and you get to know your clients. And for April's clients, they felt at home with her, at peace. She built a presence for her clients and anyone who came in and talked to her. But not only was she a business owner, she also had a media presence. She had a TikTok and she had over 200,000 followers. Her content was centered around self-growth, faith, mental health, affirmations. April showed up fully as herself, and people connected with that. But at the center of everything was her children, Serenity and Denzel. April had her daughter Serenity at 17. She made a decision that wasn't easy. After experiencing postpartum and being young, she decided she would allow her parents to have custody. But she stayed involved. She showed up. Her decision was rooted in love and wanting more for her child, more than what she could give at the time. Later, she had her son Denzel with her husband Donavan Holt. Denzel had Tourette syndrome, and April made another intentional decision. She homeschooled him because he was adapting to his recent diagnosis, and they were trying to figure out what would work best. She wanted to protect him, support him, and give him what he needed. April and Donovan began dating around 2013 to 2014. Those years vary by the sources, but nevertheless, they didn't start off in a romantic partnership. It was the opposite. Now, Donovan always thought of April as someone he wanted to pursue a romantic relationship with. But for April, she didn't know about that. And so for a large part of their courtship, they were just friends. And according to both of them, friendship was the foundation of their romantic partnership. And April, being very active on social media, not just presenting things that motivated her and affirmations that supported her lifestyle, hoping that she would share that with the world so it could help them as well. She also shared content about her relationship. And very quickly, they became a couple that people admired. But behind that, things weren't necessarily stable. In October of 2021, they got online and shared a video together saying that they were going to get a divorce. But that divorce was looming. It wasn't solidified. But on this video that you can go and look up, by the way, they both appear very amicable. They are readily saying to her audience that while they've reached this decision, they have just grown past their romantic partnership. But because friendship was the cornerstone of their relationship, they are going to remain friends. They're going to co parent, and they don't see why they can't have a friendship that will last a lifetime. And they framed it as a mutual divorce, something you don't often see. We often see the opposite. Divorces are messy and they cause a lot of grief. But they didn't divorce. They, in fact, separated. And in April of 2023, they decided to give their relationship another try. Y'all know my personality by now. You know I'm going to get a little introspective in these episodes. I'm always going to leave you with something to sit with while I tell you the story. So let me break the fourth wall for a second. Let's talk about something we all participate in that's very evident in this case. And we all do it. Social media. Because relationships today, they don't just exist in real life anymore. They live online. They're captured in highlight reels, the pictures, the trips, the matching outfits, the soft moments. All of the things we scroll past on Instagram or double tap on TikTok or watch on YouTube. Those couples we admire from a distance, and without even thinking, we label it. Hashtag couple goals. But let me ask you this. What are we really looking at? Are we witnessing love or are we witnessing performance? And I want to be clear here. I don't think for one second that April was simply putting her relationship on the internet to stunt for likes. I believe that what she offered on TikTok was what she really felt in her relationship. She felt that she found her husband, her person, and it was rooted in friendship, history, and time. And that it could last a lifetime, even though maybe her marriage didn't. And that matters because not everything we see online is fake, but that doesn't mean it tells the full truth either. So now the question becomes, what does our obsession with idealized relationships say about us as a society? Is it a mirror reflecting what we believe love should look like? Or is it projection of what we want love to be? Because it used to be, we looked to movies, to scripted stories, rom-coms, to Hollywood to show us what a perfect couple looked like. But now it's everyday people, influencers, content creators, regular couples who have become the standard. And that shift is powerful because now we're not just consuming love, we're comparing ourselves to it. And what makes April and Donovan's story different is that they didn't just show the good, they showed the arguments. They showed us that they had tension, the hard moments. And even then, it still looked like something worth wanting. And that's where it gets complicated because social media doesn't just reveal happiness, it also quietly reveals something darker, something we don't always want to acknowledge, that sometimes what looks like love on the outside can be unraveling behind the scenes. We don't always recognize it in real time. So as you're listening, I want you to keep this in the back of your mind. What did this relationship really represent? Not just for April, but for all of us watching. Because sometimes the things we admire the most are the very things we don't fully understand. By mid-July of 2023, April decided that she needed to leave. And shortly before filing for divorce, she got online and shared a video. That video also can be seen. In the video, she presents it as a story time. And April, like I said before, fully showed up as her authentic self online. She revealed right at the beginning of the story time that she had cried out her lashes the night before because she felt depressed and overwhelmed. But there in that same video, she was applying some new lashes, saying that she needed to beautify herself, get back to some of the things that made her feel good. Now, if you have an elder in your life, they usually come up with various idioms that have lasted a lifetime. And my mom often says to me anytime I can get down a depression or a funk, something that I felt April was exemplifying in her video, that you can be down and out, you can experience depression and grief and maybe feel overwhelmed, but when you look good, you feel good, or at least better. And as she was talking through her grief of just not feeling like herself and being overwhelmed and depressed, she was actively showing you she was down, but she wasn't out. One of the things that she said in her video is that she needed to get back to self care, things that made her feel good. And she was determined to get back on that path forward. And that's the attitude that summed up who April was. She had experienced many difficulties in life, from having a daughter at a young age to eventually starting her own business, getting involved in a relationship that didn't seem to serve her. Although she was experiencing challenges, she was going to be present. She was going to bounce back. And that was the energy that her followers loved about her. But she was determined to leave the relationship. Quick pause just in case you're locked in right now. I want to make sure that you're subscribed to Murder in the Black and you press that bell icon so that you can keep up on our updates. For exclusive episodes and subscriber-only content, consider becoming a paid subscriber. Here's a little nugget. We have a 3-day free trial on Apple Podcasts just in case you want to figure out the lay of the land first before you commit. Storytime with Steph is back. That is where I present many true crime stories you won't always hear on our main feed, but the stories deserve to be told. And you can watch that on whatever social media platform you enjoy us on. But I especially want those of you who are on TikTok to know that I'm back. And this is where we started our Murder in the Black community. One more quick favor. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review if you enjoy the work here. Let's get back into our story. Jamie, April's mother, later would come and give a more insightful point of view about April's relationship with Donavan. She revealed that over the years that they were together, she said that the relationship was on and off. Now, it's unclear if she was talking about their dating relationship, but even their marriage seemed to be on and off. And that seems like it shouldn't exist because while you're in a marriage, that represents commitment, that you're committed to this certain ideology. And even though we know marriages end in divorce, you do think there's a level of commitment. You see, it was on and off. She was threatening divorce several times within their relationships. The marriage wasn't just up and down. It was very, I want to be with you. I absolutely want to divorce you. And that speaks to a larger pattern. Although there was no documented instances of physical abuse, emotional abuse was present. Whenever April would try to get out of the relationship, whether they were dating or married, he would manipulate her. He would sleep in his car. He would stay by her door. He would do things to manipulate her choice. He would isolate her from her family, from her friends, and that's control cycles. And when someone keeps leaving and coming back, that's not confusion. There clearly was an established pattern inside of their relationship that suggested emotional abuse was present. On Friday, July 28th, Jamie, April's mother, was hosting an event at her church. And April actually was supposed to help her mother do the event, but she couldn't because other things came up. But they did finalize plans to go see the Barbie movie, which had just came out. However, April canceled those plans because she realized that her son had a game that evening and Donavan had to go to work. And so he wasn't going to be able to watch her son. So she needed to do it. So she canceled those plans with her mother and proceeded to say that she would meet her mother at church the very next day. Jamie, exhausted from the church event, didn't immediately respond, and she never would get a chance to because an hour later, Donavan called her and said that April was being rushed to the hospital because she was unresponsive and not breathing. Now, Jamie immediately says that she felt that something was off, even in that phone call, because the last time she heard from her daughter was just an hour before. What took place between that hour that would cause her daughter to be unresponsive and not breathing? And she didn't have a whole lot of time to collect her thoughts, but she felt a sense of uneasiness. And those questions would only intensify when she got to the hospital. When she got there, she discovered that April was on life support, and she had several injuries. She had bruising on her neck, bruising on her ankles, and broken blood vessels in her cheeks. That's called petechiae. It's often associated with strangulation or suffocation, not a simple collapse. This indicates pressure, force, very obviously a struggle. Now, according to Donovan's story, what he repeated to Jamie and police officers is that he was making lunch. April was in the shower a bit too long, and so his son was in the kitchen with him. He asked if Denzel could go into the bathroom and check on his mother. When Denzel checks, he finds his mother unresponsive on the ground. But what Donavan didn't immediately tell Jamie or police officers is that he found April on the ground with a black plastic bag over her head that was taped, duct tape around her neck. This is something that he did not even reveal to the 911 operator. He didn't reveal this until hours later. And that matters because why wouldn't you tell at least the 911 operator that or repeat that same story to investigators or to Jamie's mother? It just didn't seem right. And this detail would come back around later. Now, Jamie was on life support. She hadn't received enough oxygen to her brain, and they were hoping beyond hope that she would somehow recover. But sadly, on July 31st, April is taken off life support and she passes away. Her family, especially her mother, Jamie, was left with questions and not enough answers. Now, here's what eventually was uncovered. That a week before April's death, at the hospital, Jamie pondered on some unusual things that just kept popping up. One of the first things Donavan did was he handed April's phone over to her mom and told her that she could handle everything having to do with April, even medical decisions. Now, they were still married. So according to the order and protocol, he was the next of kin, but he very easily pushed that responsibility away. It was also revealed that he left multiple times the first day that April was at the hospital. He would leave and go back to their shared apartment and then come back. Now, it took police 6 hours to go to the apartment. And within those 6 hours, he had gone and come back to the hospital at least 3 times, according to Jamie. And that's a little sketchy, right? Because we know that police treat any incident as if it is a crime scene until proven otherwise. And so the fact that police took 6 hours and he was allowed into the apartment just seemed odd. It just didn't seem like it was protocol. And one of the other things that Jamie reflected upon was when Donavan would explain his story, he kept insisting that April wasn't acting like herself, that she kept complaining that her throat was hurting, that she just was acting unusual and odd, insinuating that maybe she caused her death. Now, a full investigation did take place. And in November of 2023, a medical examiner came back with his findings. He ruled that the cause of death was suffocation, which coincided with the evidence that we talked about. Bruising on her neck, petechiae on her cheeks. But the ruling was a suspected suicide. Now, before we move on from the medical examiner's findings, I want to play you an audio of Jamie going to TikTok to explain the medical examiner's findings and also what the detectives did when it came to giving information to the medical examiner.
We're fighting a little something. Hopefully it's gone before Thanksgiving. Last Friday, I received the report that I've been waiting for over 3 months. I was extremely upset, extremely angry when I got the report. My daughter's autopsy, April Holt. And so I took the weekend in order to pray over how to give the information to other people. And just after prayer and just after thinking about it, I think the simplest way is to just read to you from the report. Yeah, people are going to base their own opinions. I mean, that's regardless of the fact. But I have nothing to hide, and all I'm doing is trying to get justice for my daughter, and even more so after I got this report. And so I just want you to listen. I have 9 points on this autopsy that I have examined thoroughly over and over and over again. And so here's how it goes. And this is the official report, just so you know. Not making this up. It tells you that the type of death was suspected suicide. Let me give you a little backdrop. My detective decided to take it upon himself to show up at my daughter's autopsy and give them a backstory of somebody he didn't know anything about, of somebody that he didn't even have the details on this case, because we didn't have all the details on the case until later on. So he took it upon himself to go in there. This is the Nashville Metro Police Department that went in there and told them that the type of death is a suspected suicide. As we go on in her report, they give you 4 points on here. 2 of those points that stand out as a diagnosis is that they first of all did her autopsy after removing her organs, after I gave permission to do an organ donation. They first removed her organs and then they examined them, which I find completely unethical. This is a homicide case, and now you have misconstrued the evidence that could have been what we needed. And so her autopsy was done after they took out her organs, including her lungs and her trachea and things like that were not examined until after they were taken out of her body. Number 4 listed on here, which is highlighted, and just in case you wanted to see, they said that my daughter had minor blunt force trauma of the body. It says that her circumstances of death, it says that, and it says it right here, this is what my detective decided to tell them, is that my daughter, descendant, secured the bag around her head. He gave them this information when there's no proof of that at all, and he decided to go in there and give them this information. When you go back down onto the bottom and it says external examination, which I had no clue that an autopsy has so many details, and so I had to go through here and kind of highlight these points. It says there are multiple petechial hemorrhages that extend across the bilateral cheeks. She had her veins, her blood vessels were red, and they were hemorrhaging on her face, which is a sign of smothering or strangulation. And it says right here there are multiple hemorrhages across the bilateral cheeks, and you can look that up yourself. I've sent that to my detective, who I have asked, why is that not taken into account? And so he said he will look into it. Evidence of injury. This is the section on here that says, because I was told, my detective said, well, I didn't see any signs of struggle. So here's where it says there's a puncture wound surrounding her echomyosis within the right fossa. I'm not a medical person, so I'm just a mom. So there are 2 small purple bruises that are on the anterior aspect of her right forearm. There is a puncture wound in the left arm. There is a large purple echomyosis with a 6-centimeter abrasion that extends across the lateral aspect of her left thigh. Multiple small, faint purple contusions are on her lower extremities, on her bilateral lower extremities, showing, first of all, in the first page, it says that she had blunt force trauma, Now we're seeing that she's got bruises all over her body. And then as we go through here, this was just going on about her ribs and her clavicle bone. It says, summary of case, and that's the page that I'm on. It says the summary of case. The descendant had a reported past medical history of alcohol and marijuana abuse. The detective decided to make this statement up completely on his own. Never given this information. My daughter drank wine. And yes, my daughter would take a half a gummy every day of marijuana. I'm not a mom that denies or even is ashamed of what my children do. If they want to have a glass of wine and they want to take half a gummy, if that's going to help them through life, well, then go for it. But to go into an autopsy and tell them that she has a reported, where is it reported? I would love to see that. Past medical history of alcohol and marijuana abuse. There is nowhere stated in any medical record that she has this. He has made that up himself. Again, that's the Nashville Metro Police Department. And then right here, so this is the really interesting part, where they decided to say law enforcement was not suspicious of any foul play. Yeah. Went into my daughter's autopsy, who has all of these exterior elements, and says they're not even suspicious of any foul play. And then if you go on, there's another page, and it says part of the requested testing was unable to be performed, and that is because they took my daughter's organs out of her body before she had her autopsy, so they couldn't even do all of their testing. So I immediately filed this paper right here. And what this paper says is it is a request for reconsideration of suicide as a manner of death. I have written down here an explanation of how the police have decided to take it upon themselves to tell them what the definition, or what her meaning of her cause of death was. And then here is an explanation of the circumstances that surrounded what happened that day, because they didn't decide to inform the people of the autopsy that she was laying on the ground with her soon-to-be ex-husband in there with her, fighting with her before her death. They didn't decide to tell that she had this bag over her head. They said she put the bag over her head. And so I've written this little thing that I just wanted to share with you as well, and I got to read it kind of fast because I think I only have 10 minutes. So I just wrote this because I have so many thoughts going through my head right now. And it says, after receiving my daughter's autopsy report last Friday, I was extremely upset. The Nashville Metro Police Department took it upon themselves to paint a predetermined outcome and picture of not only my daughter, but the situation that surrounds my daughter's death. The Nashville Metro Police Department would not send me a copy of her report when it arrived either. I believe this was an attempt for me not to see the details surrounding their report and what they said. The detectives painted a picture of my daughter, whom they do not know, as a drug abuser, a mentally ill young woman who put a bag over her head, bruised up her own body, and committed suicide in the same home as her young son was home. In reality, my daughter, and you can ask as many people as you know that would know her, that she was a peaceful person, an encourager, a listener, loving mother, daughter, sister, niece, granddaughter. She made friends with everyone she met and was currently even helping her close friend get through his brother's suicide. She hugged and kissed her son and was journaling and drinking coffee, texting me, telling me she was going to see me at church the next morning, and then shortly after, she was no longer alive. I've submitted the forms to have the autopsy redone. I meet with the DA and my detective next week, and my detective will not answer me as to why these statements were made. My detective will not answer my questions related to the proof of struggle of her body by blunt force trauma and bruises. My detective will not answer me as to why he told them she put a bag over her head when there is no proof of that statement. I am fully aware that the Nashville Metro Police Department would love for me to shut up and file her case away in a cabinet so that it will never be seen again, and like she never existed. I have a gag order. I'm not even supposed to talk about her, but I'm going to make sure that I don't talk about anything that is involving her case around her son. But I will not be quiet about the injustice that is happening right now. I will continue to fight. I will continue to seek a way to change the laws on how detectives should have no say on what the autopsy says. I have one voice, but with all of you, I have a million voices if people could pair up.
After these findings, Jamie insisted her daughter would never take her own life. She filed complaints. She pushed back, but law enforcement told her the case was closed and they ruled it a suicide. They insisted that Jamie didn't know what she was talking about. She was just grieving. That was it. But not for Jamie. Jamie continued to speak out on TikTok. She raised awareness. She applied pressure. But even during that process, things became more complicated. At that time, Donavan had relocated to San Antonio and took Denzel with him. And when he found out that Jamie was online alleging that he had something to do with April's case, he obtained a lawyer and he had Jamie placed under a gag order. The claim was that if she continued to speak out publicly about the case, he would not allow her to see her grandson. Now, pause there because imagine being in that position. Not only are you grieving your daughter, but now you're being silenced by the very person you believe is responsible for her death. Jamie and her husband were actively fighting for custody of Denzel, but because April's death had been ruled a suicide, the court awarded custody to Donavan. The system at the time was operating as if nothing criminal had happened, which meant the person Jamie believed killed her daughter was also the person being legally empowered. And she was only granted once a month visits with Denzel. And despite all of that, Jamie kept going. Eventually, she got the case file. It was 47 pages. And inside those 47 pages, one detail changed everything and affirmed what she knew right from the beginning. Only Donovan's fingerprints were found on that plastic black bag, not April's. So now we have to ask the question, if someone placed a bag over their own head, where are their fingerprints? Because evidence doesn't just tell a story, it exposes one. Jamie insisted to investigators that her daughter would never take her own life. Empowered with this new evidence, she was beginning to retrieve the evidence she needed to back up the claim that Donavan was responsible for her daughter's death. She also was equipped with information from her grandson, who revealed that on July 28th, that morning, he heard his parents arguing in the bathroom. It was loud, and he claimed that he began to look under the crack of the door to see if he could see anybody, but all he saw was feet. So he got back up and still heard them arguing and went back to the door and looked back under the crack. And that's when he saw April on the floor. He claimed he was scared and he went back to his room hoping the fighting would stop. And Donavan comes out of the room and tells Denzel to come into the kitchen so he can make him lunch. And then that's when the rest of the story unfolds as we know it. It is during the time that she's placed under a gag order. She still is going on TikTok with tape on her mouth saying that she has been gag ordered, that she can no longer speak about it, but she has a piece of tape over her mouth on every video that says #justice for April Holt. So although she's silenced, she's still bringing awareness to April's case. This is how resilient she was. But it was during the time of the gag order, she has all this new information, the information from the case file. She also had the information about her grandson. And that actually came out 2 weeks after April's death. But now she has that and the case file to support her evidence. It's during the time of the gag order that she speaks to Donavan. And she tells him that she needs to talk to him. And if she doesn't talk to him, she's going to make sure that she speaks with investigators because she knows some things that just aren't right. And so she confronts him. And it's while they're on a FaceTime call that Donavan eventually reveals what happened to April. And of course, she records this call. He admits that he did kill her, but claimed it was an accident. According to him, they were having sex and he began choking her. He said things got out of hand and she stopped breathing. And in that moment, he panicked. But listen to what panic looks like for him. Instead of calling for help, instead of trying to save her, he staged the crime scene. He dragged her into the bathroom, placed a bag over her head, and then he went and made lunch. And not only that, he asked their son, to go check on his mother. I don't want to dismiss that fact because that part should sit with you and remain with you after I've ended this episode. That's not confusion. That's not fear. That's someone trying to fix a mistake. That's a series of decisions, intentional ones. Because even if, and that's a big if, we take this version of events at face value, not one time do you think to get her emergency help. Not one time do you call 911 or a family member, but instead, your solution is to send the child you share with her into that situation, for that to be forevermore etched on his memory. That's not panic. That's something else. And honestly, evil doesn't even fully capture how disturbing that is, because what we're looking at here is not just what happened to April. It's how far someone was willing to go to avoid accountability, even at the expense of their own child. Jamie very calmly let him talk. This lady's resilience, y'all, the way that she was able to keep calm, it should be studied. And so Jamie, equipped with all this new information, what was found in the case file, Denzel's account on what happened on July 28th, and now the recorded confession from Donavan, she walks right into that police department. And now they can no longer dismiss what she has to say as if she's only a grieving mother upset that her daughter committed suicide. No, they have to take a very close look at the evidence that she was able to research, at the evidence and the confession that she was able to get. So on July of 2024, they brought Donavan in and spoke with him. And he told the same story, that it was an accident, that he panicked. But a year had gone by, and the physical evidence that could have made it possible for him to be charged with something greater, like first-degree murder, well, it wasn't enough to combat the narrative that he now was giving to police and Jamie. And a grand jury indicted him for reckless homicide, evidence tampering, and false reporting. They extradited him from San Antonio to Tennessee to face those charges. Now, the family was obviously dismayed by these charges because the maximum of reckless homicide was just 12 years. And the family wholeheartedly believed that it was premeditated. So I want to break this down a little bit and talk about the frustration from the family, because they eventually did file a petition with change.org. The family was looking at the evidence in front of them, and according to their estimation, this was first-degree murder. So let's go piece by piece. April was found with a plastic bag tightly secured around her neck. There were injuries consistent with strangulation, not a peaceful passing. Their son heard an argument before she was found. Donavan admitted that he staged the scene. And most importantly, only his fingerprints were found on the bag, not April's. And that right there, that alone raises a major question. If she did this to herself, why isn't there physical evidence of her doing it? But it doesn't just stop there. In the days leading up to her death, April had filed for divorce. She told people she was done with the relationship. She was actively moving forward with life. And then suddenly, she's dead. And we're supposed to believe this was accidental. We're supposed to believe that this was not premeditated. Even more, Donovan's own words don't line up. He claims it happened during sex. And the family presented evidence only to investigators that April wrote down in the days before her murder that she was no longer having intimacy with Donavan. So he claims they were having sex, and that's how the accident happened, but she very clearly said they weren't. So now you have contradiction, motive, loss of control, staging, physical evidence. And that's why the family believed this wasn't reckless. This was intentional. However, the charges weren't upgraded. And let's talk about why they weren't. To prove first-degree murder, you need premeditation, meaning intent beforehand, planning, deliberation. The prosecution likely believed they couldn't prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. So instead, they charged with what they could prove: reckless homicide, tampering with evidence, false reporting. And sometimes that's how the system works. Not what feels right, but what can be proven. And that often requires that families feel left cheated. And in this case, they were cheated not once in the justice process, but they were treated unjustly in the process of the investigation. I cannot imagine how they felt because I'm enraged just telling you guys about this case. But it doesn't end there because they don't even go to trial. Donavan pled guilty to reckless homicide, and a plea deal was reached. Now, when it comes to sentencing, prosecutors and judges look at things like what can actually be proven, like we said, beyond a reasonable doubt, the likelihood of winning at trial, whether a plea deal guarantees a conviction, the defendant's prior history, cooperation, and sometimes what outcomes protect the family from a worst case scenario. Because going to trial is always a risk. Jamie was told something very important, that if they were to go to trial, prosecutors usually go to the families and say, we're going to present a plea deal. How do you feel about this? And so they said that if they went to trial, it could have resulted in less time, despite the maximum in Tennessee for reckless homicide being 12 years. Or it could result in a weaker outcome. And that's something families are forced to weigh. Not what feels right, as we just said, but what is guaranteed. And then there's this part, community corrections, which means after the prison time, he's not just free, but he's also not fully incarcerated. It's a structured release. He can live in the community, work, be monitored, but he is no longer behind bars. And for a lot of families, that feels like a second loss. So because of this plea deal, he was sentenced to, wait for it, just 2 years. And after, he would be on community supervision for 8. Jamie revealed after sentencing, and I quote, "It wasn't much of an agreement. I was backed into a corner." And she continued with these words, "I have no words. My emotions are everywhere. I've been very angry." And lastly, he's a murderer. And now he's going to be back on the streets because of our justice system. Now that we're at the end of this case, I want to ask you something. Can you see why this one stays on my heart and on my mind? Because April wasn't just a victim in this story. She was a woman who was actively becoming. At 29 years old, she had a level of self-awareness that many people don't reach until much later in life. She knew what she wanted. She was trying to build something better for herself and for her children. And by all accounts, she was beautiful, inside and out. And her life was taken from her. And on Murder in the Black, we talk about domestic violence with intention, with care, with advocacy. And this case is important because even though there were no reports of physical abuse, this shows us something we don't talk about enough. Emotional abuse is just as dangerous because the signs were there. The manipulation, the control, the isolation, the subtle ways he tried to influence her decisions. And when he realized he no longer had that control, he took matters into his own hands, literally. And then there's Jamie, April's mother. And I have to say this, Jamie is the embodiment of a mother's love, but not the kind of love that should ever be tested like this. Because no mother should have to fight for justice for their child. Because the people responsible for investigating the case simply did not want to do their job. And let's be clear, it's not that they couldn't dig deeper. is that they didn't want to pay attention to what was already in front of them. And because of that, Jamie had to become everything: a detective, a researcher, an advocate, an investigator, all while grieving her daughter. And that's something I don't think we talk about enough either. Because how do you properly grieve when you're forced to fight at the same time? Jamie never gave up. She kept pushing. She kept asking questions. She kept demanding answers. And while there was a conviction, I don't think she ever received full justice. As a matter of fact, I know she never received full justice. Because at the end of all of this, Donavan, the sorry speck of a man that is responsible, will one day walk free as early as 2027. And that sits on my chest like an elephant. Because April doesn't get that chance. Her children don't get that chance. Jamie doesn't get that chance. This story matters because this just isn't about what happened. It's about what was missed, what was ignored, and what it cost. My heart truly aches for April's family, especially for her children, especially for her mother, because this isn't a loss that fades. It's something that they will carry for a lifetime. And the hardest part about this story is the danger that didn't look dangerous until it was too late. As I say always, if you enjoyed this episode of Murder in the Black, join us over on YouTube or Spotify for visuals where you can see us and interact with us and look at pictures of the case and the victims and perpetrators that were involved. And don't forget, make sure you subscribe and smash that bell icon on YouTube to get notified whenever we have story time with Steph or a podcast episode. Remember, in season 9, every episode comes with a deeper Substack article. Make sure you join the fam and the community over on Substack. If you love the way that we tell stories, we ask that you simply provide us a thank you by giving us a 5-star review on whatever platform you enjoy us on. Lastly, if you enjoy the segment True Crime and Current News, and you see a story that may not be complete but deserves our attention here on Murder in the Black, you can simply send that in via DMs on any of the social media platforms that we participate on, or you can email us. You'll find all that information in our show notes. Until next time, this is Murder in the Black. We'll see you next week.